There's a saying that some people or things come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And I think this applies beautifully to yoga too. Over our years, our practice will go through its own cycles. There's periods where we're deeply connected to a particular style or lineage or approach, sometimes for a very specific reason, sometimes for a longer season, and sometimes we discover practices or philosophies that will stay with us for a lifetime. And this week, I wanted to talk about how different styles and trends in yoga can influence our practice and teaching, and how we might identify what's lasting and what might be more fleeting, and perhaps help us connect modern trends to our deeper values and intentions in yoga. And so, to begin, like many of you, my own yoga journey reflects these reasons and seasons. When I began practicing yoga, I was doing Shivananda yoga for a reason. And the reason being, it was the only yoga class available in my small town. It was a great introduction to yoga practice and philosophy for me, but it wasn't really the style for me. And I moved on when I had greater access to more yoga options. And for a while, I kind of floated around exploring some different styles and trends of the time. I found myself really digging into Ashtanga for a big season. It was exciting and challenging, and it helped me more deeply establish my practice. And then I also had seasons with alignment-based yoga and more metaphysically oriented yoga and chanting and kirtan, but I did move on from each of those styles, taking some of what I learned with me. And eventually, many of those experiences blended into the vinyasa flow practice that I still love today. I want to pause here for a little journaling prompt for those of you who want to take some time to think about your own reasons, seasons, and lifetimes. So, my first prompt is, can you see some reasons and seasons in your own journey at this stage? Can you think about a yoga style or an approach you've tried recently? Was it something that served a reason, like a specific need, or a season, a phase of exploration? Moving on, let's talk about why our yoga seasons might end. Not everything's meant to last forever, and that's healthy. A particular style or trend may open a door or shift your perspective or meet a specific need, and then naturally make way for something new. So, why might a yoga season end? Let's talk about some common reasons, like practical changes, changes in your own schedule or location or access, losing a favorite teacher or studio, perhaps your own shifting goals or intentions for practice. Perhaps changes in your body, through age or illness or injury or disability. It might be because of the influence of teachers or friends or fellow yogis, or a new inspiration or a new teacher or a new style that really sparks your curiosity. So, journal prompt, can you identify any reasons why you've moved on from a certain practice or a certain style? Next, let's talk about understanding trends in yoga. So, uh, to me, a trend isn't the same as a yoga style or a yoga lineage. Trends are often shorter term shifts within a yoga style that can influence our sequencing, our language, the props or tools we use, or maybe the overall rhythm or atmosphere of a yoga class. Yoga is not fixed. Since its inception, yoga has always been fluid and evolving and responsive to broader movements and like wellness, fitness, spirituality, the media, healthcare, and of course our cultural and social movements. So with all of that, we can look at our yoga trends and see that some trends can kind of disappear without leaving much of a mark. Some will spark the next trend. Some are maybe passing trends, but they add to how we practice and teach yoga. And some leave a lasting impression, which I hope is the case with the current rise of accessible yoga, trauma-sensitive yoga, inclusive yoga. Using the reason, season, lifetime lens, I think can help us discern what is worth exploring and what remains central to our values as a teacher. So if we think about some of the trends, well, I'll talk about some of the trends that I've seen over the years, like dynamic yoga, Ashtanga, Vinyasa, power yoga, hot yoga like Bikram and Moksha, yoga-based fitness like Body Balance or Yoga Fit, alignment-based yoga like Anusara or Iyengar, restorative and yin yoga, very structured yoga like Ashtanga, and very unstructured yoga, maybe like Kripalu. Equipment-focused classes like restorative props, chair yoga, aerial hammocks, sup boards, stand-up paddle and yoga. Yoga for special populations like seniors, kids, pregnancy, athletes. And yoga fusions like yoga and Pilates fusions, yoga and dance fusions, HIIT yoga. So take some time maybe to think about what yoga trends you've noticed or you've been part of. You might like to pause here and just kind of make a list of some of the trends you've seen come and go or come and stay. Next, we'll talk about what might drive trends in yoga. And I think it can be interesting to examine where these trends come from and what are some of the common drivers of trends or evolutions in yoga. And that might include like cultural or fitness themes. So it might be things like heated spaces or functional movement or a rise in interest in strength training, a greater focus on inclusivity or mindfulness. And these can ripple into yoga. Another common driver could be research and also pseudo research. So fascia, nervous system regulation, stretching science, trauma sensitivity, some really solid, some perhaps exaggerated research, but these all still really influence our sequencing and our teaching and our languaging around yoga. We also have the driver of media and novelty. Media really relies on novelty. And some trends relate to what's being discussed in the media. Sometimes that's really useful practices and innovations like accessible yoga or yoga for elite athletes, for example. Sometimes more social media friendly practices, clickbait kind of practices like goat yoga or yoga and wine. And some of these trends invite people into yoga who might never have tried it before. Others perhaps distract from its essence. So that's something to think about. Another driver could be our human tendency towards extremes. And we often take simple, beneficial things and exaggerate them, thinking if a little bit is good, a lot must be better. I think about those evolutions over the past few decades where walking became power walking and napping became power napping and yoga became power yoga. So some of our trends are driven by that need to take things further. And we also have micro trends within teaching. So we might think of smaller trends as micro trends. They don't completely reshape our practice, but they can be influential in our sequencing and teaching. And I think of the years of hip opening and heart opening classes, or the partner yoga years, or the live music played during classes. These days, very much the single-sided vinyasa flows, warrior one, warrior two, reverse warrior. And of course, the rise of the 60-minute all levels drop-in class. And these shifts shape how we're currently teaching without perhaps being permanent changes, right? So I'll pause here for a prompt for reflection. Which of these drivers do you think influences you the most? The culture, the research, social media, novelty, or something else? How do you decide whether a new trend is worth exploring? Next, let's talk about what isn't a trend for you. What are your lifetime practices? So we've talked a little bit about the reasons and the seasons. I'd like to now touch on what endures. And I'll start with a quick example. I started my fitness journey in my teens with like lunges and squats. Now in my 50s, I'm still doing lunges and squats. Decades of fitness trends don't outlive those beneficial basics. And the same goes with yoga. 30 years ago, I was practicing breath awareness, sun salutations, meditation or shavasana. And no matter what trends carried me along, those practices have remained. And while these days my own movement practice is gentle yoga, which is a new season, the part that remains my own lifetime yoga is philosophy and ethics, examining how we think, how we act, how we speak, how we relate, how we show up in community, and using a mindful movement practice as part of that examination. And it's been really quite nice to use this opportunity of this discussion to reflect back on a yoga journey and to see what has ebbed and flowed and what has remained steady. So, my next journal prompt for your reflection is: what approach or style or practice or philosophy feels like it might stay with you for a lifetime? And that might be breath work, meditation, philosophy, specific postures, a morning routine, ethics, chanting. So maybe pause here and take some time to think about that. Next, we'll talk about discernment and integration. So trends can make yoga feel really alive and evolving, and they can keep us curious and questioning, and they can help us remain fresh in our teaching. However, our role as teachers is to discern: does this practice help students connect more deeply with awareness, with kindness and steadiness, or does it distract them from it? So my prompt for discussion is: how do you balance curiosity and discernment when new practices or new props appear? And how might you introduce a new trend to students responsibly without losing sight of yoga's foundations? Um, and thirdly, are there any current trends you think are worth keeping or revisiting? Okay, in closing, just like in fitness and nutrition, trends come and go with big promises to revolutionize everything. But over time in yoga, what endures is the same: breath, awareness, movement, rest, ethics. The trends may shift, but the fundamentals, the roots of yoga remain. And as yoga continues to evolve, which is part of its beauty, we can stay both curious and grounded and be open to what the next season brings. So my final question for reflection is, what's one practice or principle that feels like a lifetime for you? Something that has stayed constant through all the changes. If you'd like to explore this further or have some help with the journal prompts, you can visit the website at yogatrinity.com for a downloadable journaling sheet that can help you reflect on your own reasons, seasons, and lifetimes. For now, I want to thank you for being here and being part of my yoga journey, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you so much.